to. We will start off by introducing ourselves. My name is Juliet Mckenna, and next January will be the 25th anniversary of my first novel being published. 25 years, 25 books, which is a bit startling, really. So, yeah, if we're talking about sustaining creativity over a long career, I can see why they picked me. So we shall probably explore what I write and how I write it through the course of this panel. I have written epic fantasy, I am currently writing contemporary fantasy set in rural Britain, and I have also written an Arthurian retelling from a female-centred point of view. So that's one quick answer, basically write different things. So, and if we could start with Shellie and go down the line.
Hi, I'm Shellie Horst. Most people know me for the reviews that I do for SFF World and BSFA Review. I also write, and I do book covers too. So I am coming to this panel as an emerging author, and how I juggle trying to find the time to fit the reviews and the writing together with things like that.
Hi, I'm Ian Hunter. I'm a children's author, short story writer and poet. I'm also a review as well. I'm also the BFS's poetry editor, so apologies that I've rejected some of your poems recently. Sorry about that.
I haven't sent you any poems, so I'm feeling absolutely fine right now. Sorry, I also don't have a name badge because, Austin Powers is looking for me. My name's Russell Smith. I'm a, these days most of my thing at the moment is I'm just about to enter the second year of a history PhD up at University of Glasgow, but I've mostly at the moment been firing the occasional short story off to anthologies. I last year got into Spy Funk, which is great, and I'm about to get one into Space Funk, which is actually weirdly tangentially related to my PhD subject. I also write RPG source books for mostly these days for Chaosium. So just got something exciting in the pipeline for the Rivers of London game coming soon.
Excellent. Right, we are talking about inspiration. We are not going to be discussing where you get your ideas from, because as I think everybody on this panel and most of the people in this room would agree, ideas aren't the issue. Lack of ideas, no, I've never met a writer who suffered from that. But the idea is only the first start of the process. Creativity is turning that idea into a story worth reading. Unless, of course, you're a 20-something TV star, in which case you get handed a ghostwriter. So, people say frequently, I could write a book if I only had the time. Well, let's start there. Where do you find the time to be creative? I am a full-time writer. I write from home. I wrote when my kids were at school. They are now adults. But for example, pretty much all of the advance for my first novel went on paying for childcare, so I could write my second novel. So we have to find time is the first thing.
Where do I find time? I fit my time around caring. I'm a carer for parents and husband as well. Of course, I have children, so I have to block time out and lock doors and turn phones off. You have to be ruthless with that time at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult if you have a full-time job. You have a job that's paying your way, but because you need that creative, nervous energy, and if you've had a long day working, you're kind of exhausted and not having that energy in your being. So I mean, someone once told me that if you want to write, get up early, get up before everyone else, and put in some time. I mean, when I try to write, I think one of the things is not to put sort of unnecessary demands on yourself and targets that you can't meet. Like, I'm going to lose a stone by next week or whatever, I'm going to lose a stone in a month or something like that. But you know, it's like that. I'm going to write 1,000 words a day, and sometimes I do manage to write 1,000 words a day. I'm a wage slave for a local authority, so but sometimes I just try to write like 500 words a day. 500 words a day adds up, but so don't put unnecessary demands and pressures on yourself. I'd say that as well.
Where do I find time for this stuff? I don't. I probably sound very might sound a bit different to what you've heard here, but I seem to either be an agent of chaos or have chaos following me very closely around. So after a while of fighting this, I decided actually it's probably better for me if I just work with it a bit. So basically things things happen when they do. Don't get me wrong, I have deadlines for things, but I have discovered the worst thing I can personally do, and everything I say is with the caveat, this works for me, it may not work for you. I absolutely wouldn't recommend any of half the stuff I do to advice, but yes, I need days for. I find I often need days for particular things. I try and at the moment, after a degree of particularly high chaos, my general this is as close as I can semblance to a routine is I've definitely got definitely Monday through Thursday is PhD stuff, and that's when I get up. I either read, research, or write, or speak to people I need to. It's one of those. It's generally one of those four things. If I'm home, I like to put a day to myself to deal with other other writing projects, because they're the thing I often like to call them is a bit of a palate cleanser for me at the moment, because when I'm into various dense history and academia, it's nice to have a day where I'm just sort of right. What can I blow up today? And it's just or something else. My creative projects vary from this is stuff people have asked me to do, which I'm really, really grateful for, because that wasn't happening a few years ago. So squeeze those in, and on the other side, the stuff that I want to be working on. I've got short stories of some type. Short stories are either I've had this idea, or there's this anthology that needs this. Let me see if I can go for that. So they're fine, and then kind of very fire and forget from that point of view. Longer projects like my own Arthurian novel, which is taking forever mostly because I pick up a chapter for a month a year and get that done and then come back for it at current rate. I'm trying to improve that, but life. But again, that's just where can I squeeze this in?
Yeah, I mean we've all got to be realistic about what time is available, but we've also got to schedule our time and protect our time. Basically, if we treat ourselves as professional writers, then other people will. It's not sort of, your writing is this nice hobby that you do on the side, and people ring you up and what are you doing? I'm working. Oh. So we have an idea, and we have blocked out some time. What else do we need mentally, physically? I like bouncing ideas off other people, particularly my husband, he designs car assembly lines. So he is very good on detail, and he's very good on logical progression. And one of the things that I've found over the years is you might have the idea, but it's not quite there. I wanted to write a book about, from the point of view of the people who get trampled into the mud by the ambitions of kings and princes. This is ultimately what became the Lescario Revolution trilogy. And that must have been 10 years before I found the right approach, and I kept bouncing ideas off my husband. How about if I do this? No, it's going to be a boring book about peasants covered in mud. No, but what if it... No, still boring peasants covered in mud. Now, what about peasants covered in mud? And then I got the idea. Yeah. So I have, and I did, I've sat and chatted ideas with other writers as well. Writers don't nick each other's ideas. Basically, there are more than enough to go around. So I have always found bouncing ideas off other people very useful to get from that. It's an idea, but how exactly am I going to approach it? Russell, have you got any particular strategies? Or?
Yeah. Well, there's two things, and there's two really main things, and all of them, both of them come back to yes. Let's talk to someone about it, and it may be entirely it may be the perfect person to ask for reasons of their expertise on a subject, or someone who doesn't know anything about the subject, and how does this sound? And if they say, oh, I'm not sure I'm going to hear that, then needs tweaking. On the other hand, if you go, it's sort of not usually my thing, but I really like that idea. Then you're onto a winner. So that's a thing. The other thing is just and as I say, it's related. Come to things like this, or so yeah. For creative writing, I can't beat bumping into people at a conference and sitting in the bar going, I've had this idea for something, and then before you know it, you've an hour has passed, and everyone sat there has exchanged their various ideas and gone off with better ones in the first place. Similarly, for me academically, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same type of thing. Like a week or so ago, I was at the RAF Museum annual conference, and that's great because people sort of, no matter how flat you're feeling, people you have enough people going, what's your PhD in? Sort of, whilst you have an autopilot answer on your subject, then people ask you a question about it, and before you know it, you're sort of you sort of, well, yeah, basically it's this, and again, 15 minutes later, you're sort of, oh right, yeah, it's that. I do know something about what I'm talking about.
So, and the other thing is when you're having that exchange of ideas, people can flag up the but what about? At which point you go, bugger, and you have to go and think about it. Yeah.
I can just say that Peasants Covered in Mud is a great website, and the calendars are brilliant as well. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know about the audience, but I'm a member of a couple of writers groups, and I've always seemed to be a member of a couple of writers groups. So, you know, apart from reading your own stuff to other people and getting feedback, but the chance to talk to them about ideas and bouncing ideas off. And I'm a member of the Glasgow Science Fiction Writers Circle, and it's full of weird people, but it's full of weird people who are interested. Like one guy's an expert in sort of sword fighting and stuff. So there's always sort of expertise you can sort of fit into and pick up and sort of get ideas from that as well. But
I will be around one of these days, I promise.
Yeah. But so I think you know that. Talking to other people, and like you're saying, I think sometimes writers can be very protective about ideas and think somebody's going to nick that, but you know, is there an original idea, you know, under the sun, and you know, writers have got other projects that they're working on, so I don't think you should worry about sort of giving away your sort of fantastic idea. But I do also think that if you've got an idea for a really good story or a novel, kind of ferments in your head for a long time until it's ripe and ready to be released. I mean, I've got an idea for a novel I've had and it was kind of inspired by the birth of my children, and it's still not down in paper, but it's bubbling away in my head and all the plot's bouncing around, and I think maybe that's part of the process that it gets to a point where it's ready to be released.
Yeah, it's a you can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing. So talking to other people, just getting yourself outside of your usual helps move things and inspires, and walking for me is really important. Just that getting away from all of the other mental load issues and things like that, and just having that sedentary pace, it just seems to rattle the different part of the brain, and it allows you, and if you can remove yourself from your usual to give your brain space to do that, and put the things that you normally do down. Reading is really bad for me when I'm trying to write, because I am just sucked into another author's world, and I can't put, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And I recently, as you know, just finished reading a really good book by you. And I said, at Fantasycon, I'm going to review it, and I haven't had the time to write. I've read the book, but it's not I haven't had the time, but I want the correct words, the just space. And it's that mind space that you need to create, so to be able to allow the stories to percolate through to where you want to be, and then bouncing it off. Again, like what should I say? Writers groups are really good for bouncing ideas around. I'm part of two different ones. One, I am the only genre author in the room. They're all published authors in one way or another, but I am the only genre, and they all look at me sometimes and go, dragons, really? Or, spaceships, why? Recently I was really brave for me, and I stood up in front of a women's lit open mic night, and I just read a piece from semi-horror-esque focus. But I knew it leaned into their kind of thing, and you know when your story hits home, because a bit like in a classroom, the light bulbs go on and everybody's looking at you and paying attention. And I just silenced the room. I thought, yeah, that story works now. I know I'm in the right place for that. So it's sort of taking yourself out of your comfort zone as well. So
So we found the time. Well, we got the idea. We found the time. We've got the handle on the idea, and we're working away at it, and then something happens. And it will be something external, and it's something you can do nothing about, and you end up thinking, why do I bloody bother? The Lescario Revolution books. Pro tip, don't have your list put up for sale when the first book of a trilogy has just come out, and when the much delayed second volume is coming out from a different publisher, don't have that happen the week Borders goes bust. And over the 25 years, I have had the why do I bloody bother, which is it's external factors that throw you off your game, throw you off your pace. How do you get back on the horse? How do you get back into the groove? Yes.
All right. For me, it happens so often, doesn't it? It comes at you from so many different ways. It can be anything. It can be a story rejection. It can be, for me, an out of the blue telephone call that something needs done. It can be any number of. I mean, it's not quite as high level as everything that you've just mentioned. But it's always, for me, it's always remembering. It's getting that, stepping back from the intensity of what's just hit, and remembering that small steps are still steps in the right direction. And it's easy to compare yourself to everybody else who's writing, published, done this, done that, done the other, but they're not on your journey, and they're not doing your story, and they're not dealing with what you're dealing. So for me, it's about getting that perspective, putting tools down sometimes, and just coming away from it, remembering. I have a sign above my writing desk that just reminds me why I am doing it, and it's one of my daughters has bought me a card, and it's let's just be grown-ups for once, and it's like, yes, okay, it's not all about adulting 101 and just stepping back and just going back into the flow, and sometimes just ranting with other authors and writers.
Ranting with your peers is very therapeutic, I find.
Or just ranting.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm in the process of moving houses now, and I've been digging out. I mean, that's an event that gets away in your writing, but I've been digging out stuff and folders and pads and things that had started, and I think that when you read them, you think, what was that about? What was the inspiration for that? I don't know how to continue with that. And I think one of the things is if things get in the way and you have to set things aside, don't leave them too long. You know, I think it is important that if you're struggling with something, or you've even finished a draft, to put it away and then take it back out and read it over again, but don't leave it too long. You know, keeping that sort of mindset, I think that's important to sort of not lose that sort of space and inspiration, because it's funny when, I think it's one of probably the questions that a writer sort of hates getting is, where do you get your ideas from? And I used to, not pride myself, but I used to know every story or every poem, what the inspiration was for that, and now I don't. And maybe that's because, and I'm not trying to sound big-headed, that I've had so many stories published or so many poems published that I can't remember, or maybe I'm just getting old. But you know, I just can't sort of think, where did that idea come from? You know, because there are times where you can. I was doing a reading earlier, and I was reading the prologue of a young adult novel called Tim O'Shanter, and it was basically, I was at the Edinburgh Book Festival. I don't know if anybody's been up to Edinburgh. The Edinburgh Book Festival was pretty huge, but in the old Book Festival until a couple of years ago was in Charlotte Square. It's recently moved to a new venue, and they had various, in the square, the big gardens, they had various marquees, and they had a big adult book tent and a children's book tent. And I walked into the children's book tent, and there was a big display from Barrington Stoke, who are a publisher of children's books for children who are dyslexic or reluctant to read. And Larry Dawn, who's a children's writer, had written a children's book based on Ravi Burns' poem Tam O'Shanter. And I went in, and it just hit me in the face, and I thought, Tim O'Shanter? Who's Tim O'Shanter? And it just came to me like that. And that's one of the sort of few sort of, I don't know, lightning bolt moments that I've had. So, but I do think that, and the funny thing about that was that when we talk about writing and finding time to write, that the book festival was in August, and so I thought, it was bubbling away in my head, and then the 1st of September I thought, I'm going to write this novel, and I decided to write 1,000 words a day in September, and I got to the 28th of September, and I'd written 28,000 words, and I was absolutely sick of it. And I just put it away, and then I came back to it, and then I finally finished it. So I think it's important to, if you have the inspiration idea, to give yourself some time to let it ferment in your head and on the page when you put it away, but then take it back out. But don't leave that space too long, because you kind of get out of that sort of head space and where the thought processes were at the beginning of it.
Whilst I was, as soon as I heard that question, I was trying just to hold back maniacal laughter. And you'll know most of what, and I can tell you stuff has happened since then as well, which is like how I've not left head-shaped dents in my desk. Sometimes I do not know. So something some part I'm going to say possibly contradicts that, but the place I would start is at least from where I'm coming from. Don't underestimate what you are going through at a time. You can't always feel the extent of it. You know it's something, and you'll get up some day. You'll get up some days and you'll think, look, I've got this list of about 5 things to do, and then you'll sit in front of the computer and nothing will happen. And it's just sort of, and then this could rinse and repeat for a few days. And then one of your mates would just tell you, how did you deal with, have you managed to solve that, have you managed to solve that thing you were telling me about last time? I was like, no, I haven't actually, I've just got to the, and you've got this list of stuff to do? Yeah. How are you even looking at that? I'm like, oh, I kind of have to. and there's that weird little balance of, well, it's, somebody will eventually say, well, no wonder you're stressing with that, mate. Just maybe
an external
maybe one thing at a time.
An external review can help. One of the things that I have found is, even if a project has sort of completely run into the sand, no writing is ever wasted.
Yeah.
Many years ago, I was working in parallel with the epic fantasy I was writing at the time. I was working on a contemporary thriller, and I was working with my agent, then Maggie Nowak, and it was about a young female professional from London working in the hotel trade, goes to work in an old house that's being converted into a hotel in the Cotswolds, and strange things start happening. Yeah. And this was going to be a contemporary women's fiction thriller. And Maggie died. And I did not have, I'd written a draft and we'd worked on it, and I did not have the heart to look at that book again, at all. And then I wrote The Green Man's Heir, which I thought was going to be a one and done. And people will say, "Oh, this is great, when's the next one coming out?" Pardon? Because that was at one of the downward troughs of my career over the last 25 years. And that book took off in a way that simply didn't expect.
And now Panthers.
Yeah. Yeah, book 6 in that series comes out next month. And people wanted a sequel, and I had absolutely no idea what to do. And then I was on holiday in the Lake District, and I was reading something else completely different. And I suddenly thought, that book I was working on with Maggie, if I took that setting and that premise and the sort of surrounding cast of characters and put Daniel, the hero from The Green Man's Heir, into that scenario and dialed up the is it supernatural to hell yes, I've got a book. And so even when a project looks as if it's completely run into the sand, things can happen. And with the, you can always find a new angle on something. That is possibly the most extreme example I've got. But I've had, I've got time, I've got my idea, I've got my concept, I've got my creativity, and it's all going, and suddenly you hit a block where a story element just isn't working. With The Assassin's Edge, the 5th of my first series, there was a story element which I was convinced by, my editor was convinced by, we discussed it, it was all in the proposal, it was all in the outline, and I got to the writing of it, and it just was not coming together. And so I took a step back, and I listened to things on the radio, and I read completely unrelated things. And then a week or more later, I rang my editor and said, "Tim, how do you feel about pirates?" Instead of, "Yeah, if you can make it work, go ahead." And I did, and it was a much better book. So, how do you get around those sorts of roadblocks, Ian? Have you encountered those sorts of roadblocks in your writing?
I think the very first sort of children's book I tried to write, and it shows you how was going to be one of those adventure game book ones. You walk down a corridor and there's 2 doors, and should you take the one on the right or take the one on the left, and if you take the one right, flip to page 47 and stuff, and all the rest of it. And I started writing it, and it just kind of, maybe I ran out of sort of go-to sort of lines and stuff, and so I rewrote it as a thing called Through the Magic Mirror, which was basically that sort of adventure game book but told properly as a proper novel. So I suppose that's one way of sort of getting around it for me. Yeah. I mean, I think certainly for the children's books I've written talking about ideas. The first one I had published, The Dark Knight's Blade, was based on my love of a clunky old film called Chinese Ghost Story, which is, if anyone saw it now, they would laugh at the special effects and the acting and all the rest of it. But it was such a roller coaster ride of fun, of action and clunky special effects involving zombies and dragons and ghosts and all sorts of stuff, but it was a real roller coaster ride, and I thought, I love this film, and I wanted to write a sort of roller coaster ride of a children's book, and that's kind of inspired me to do that.
The Thief's Gamble, because I had written the definitive blockbuster fantasy masterwork in my 20s, And it went the round of agents and editors and came winging back with rejection slips, saying variations on things like, there is nothing to distinguish this from the 6 competent fantasy novels that have crossed my desk this week. And I read a lot of crime fiction. And so I thought in the 80s and early 90s, we had the independently minded female private eye, who was her own woman, not defined by her relationships with men, making her own way in the world. And I thought, how would that character work in a high epic fantasy setting? Let's find out. And that book became Thieves' Gamble. So, you know, I've always found reading other genres gives me a lot of, you know, new ideas, new perspectives.
It's funny you should say that, because I remember watching Sicario, the film, and I think right at the beginning they go out to this house. It's been a while since I've seen it, and the house, in the walls of the house, there's people in the walls. I think it's some drug gang thing, but the people have been encased behind the walls, and they start tripping. And that gave me an idea for a fantasy novel. How could you sort of transfer that to a sort of fantasy sort of setting? And I've been working on a novel where it's an old city and it's a rambling metropolis of a city, and there's parts of it forgotten and are off limits. But at the gates, there have been people sort of buried in the gates to protect the city, and someone unwittingly exposes one of the bodies in the gates. But that came from Sicario, a crime film. Yeah.
Have you run into particular roadblocks?
Yeah, I mean, I've got there's a couple of things. I've got one of those dreaded things, which is which is an unfinished trilogy, and I have actually written 4/3 of 2 drafts of the final book, but that I had intended, and I'm really sad because I was centering that one around probably my favourite character of the group, but for many reasons, I don't believe this one is going to happen. But you know what? It's a lot of words to just not do anything with. So yeah, that's in the locker somewhere. It very much isn't going to fit anything I'm doing elsewhere. So I've got to stop and figure out how I want to come back to that. There are options. Even now there are options, but it's not. It's fallen. Yeah, and it's fallen quite a bit down my priorities list as well. I mean, the other side of this is I started, you know, gathering a few notes for a historical fiction that I was considering looking at, and these few notes ran into can I find some more research on this, and couldn't find the books. Then found out why. I was just like, yes, caution, entering under research topic. Oh, hang on. Fast forward a few years, I am now doing the PhD in that under research topic, and the history is, and that has taken over for that. I don't mean I'm not going to go back to to said historical novel at some point, but it's going to be very different when I walk into that room.
Have you?
Writing novels doesn't fit around chaotic lifestyles. This is my block that I am currently working around. I've written this wonderful novel, as you do. This first draft, it's sat on the hard drive and sat there, and I'm like, what is wrong with it? I knew, you know inside you when the story's not right. And I'm like picking away at this and wondering why. And at the beginning of this year, I'm sat thinking, woe is me, threw all my toys out the pram, and why won't this story work? How can I come at this from a different way? Set it aside, entered a competition that was completely unrelated to everything I was doing, just 500 words, put them together, sent them out, didn't think anything of it, got a lot of praise back. Okay, so why did that do well and why is this not working? Oh, okay, I just need to, and it's what I call the Build-A-Bear moment. Everybody knows Build-A-Bear, how Build-A-Bear stores work, right? So you go in, you pick your teddy bear, you stuff it, and then you have this lovely bear. but unstuffing it is, for me, is the editing process. You unstuff it and figure out why there's a lump in the bear or whatever. So it's working through short fiction, which is a different story entirely, but working through short fiction and making those words really mean something, and finding the weight in the words and the descriptions and the atmospheres. And then I accidentally picked up the synopsis for the novel, and I'm like, oh, there's 3 books here, no wonder it doesn't work. Okay, fair enough. So, and then I used Twine to unpick, it's an interactive plotting, well, no, it's an interactive fiction software, but it's also really good for plotting your books out if you like to move things around and things, because you can really good piece of work. So yes, I'm reworking. So considering how many books I've read and how many different books I review, and I worked, why didn't I see that before? So you have to be gentle to yourself as well when you get stuck on these things and sort of.
I think being gentle to yourself is a key component, no matter what stage you are of this, and that goes, that threads into every question we've asked already as well. You've got to, none of the rest works if you've kind of not, you haven't had that time to remember to breathe when you need to.
Talking of questions, do we have any from the floor?
Do you find a particular type of medium sort of inspires you from a particular point of view, whether it's art or music or film, perhaps, just from the point of view of inspiring the imagination, getting your wheels going again?
I couldn't say that it was anyone in particular. I very rarely get inspiration from music. I don't listen to I certainly can't listen to music while I write. But if I am stuck, or even just generally, I go to stately homes, I go to museums, I go to galleries, and I will see things that will, that's interesting, or just a visual, or and quite often something I see in passing will actually feed into an idea I've got at the moment, and sometimes it will be that little thing that I need to set a whole new idea rolling. So yes, I think looking for inspiration in other things is certainly very important for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of maybe picking up on something that Russell said there about being kind to yourself, but almost having fun with your writing.
Yes.
And enjoying it. And I've got a couple of side projects because I write a lot of poems, and I try to write a lot of poems. And times when I'm struggling to write poems, I've got like 3 sort of little side projects. One is called, one is about PJ Harvey. I'm a huge PJ Harvey fan, and so I've written poems about her album covers, her song titles, some of the lyrics in her songs. So, and occasionally these have actually been published elsewhere, so they can't be too bad. So that's one of the side projects I've got to try and inspire me to write. And another one is about pop art. So I kind of go online and I look at works by pop artists like Andy Warhol or Lichtenstein or other people, and I get inspired to write a poem based on that painting. And I've written tons of pop art poems, and again, some of them have been published. And the last one I've got is I'm a sort of bit of a heavy metal fan, and I've still got my camping tag from this year's download on. I'll probably take it off next year, unless it falls off or it's my wrist and my hand falls off or something. But I used to subscribe to a magazine called Kerrang, which is still going, Kerrang. It's seemingly the noise that a guitar chord makes, or the guitar makes when you strum the strings. And I used to, when I was stuck for writing poems, go through an issue of Kerrang and look at, again, album titles or song titles. So there's a Green Day song, Jesus of Suburbia, or there's a band called 30 Days of Static, or Taking Back Sunday, and I would write a poem based on, just to get the sort of creative sort of juices. And it's also a bit of fun, and I've been lucky enough with all those 3 instances to get some of those things published.
I've had a lot of fun writing short stories, and I find that yeah, having fun with things.
I find creativity, your inspiration, Two Steps from Hell has a lot to answer for. I find them really good for re-inspiring and getting my mind focused. But I don't know how many of you have actually gone for a walk around Birmingham at all while you've been here, and just what works for me, I seem to be, why is that there? Why did people, I mean obviously why is the train station there, if you know the history and things like that, it all comes together, but when you start applying those questions into your writing and things like that, the creativity just sort of like spirals off, and before you realise it, you're grabbing for your notebook to write the ideas down before you lose track of them. Photographs often, and just random things that people say seem to be a really good sense of spark.
Russell?
If I get stuck on something, I don't always know at the time what it is I need to fix it. But there's on the plus side to that, there are multiple solutions to this. I mean, we've had quite a few mentions of different things with music. I love a playlist when I'm working on something. This comes with a big downside though. At some point I've had to put together the playlist, and that can, if I'm not careful, that takes over what I'm doing. So there's got to be a time. So a Sunday where I say I'm not working on something, but oh yeah, I want to spin some discs. We'll hop on, and the playlist will happen then, and then a couple of weeks later I might come back and say, oh, okay, I want to write something now. Try and pick something that doesn't have too deep or profound lyrics, or is too or is too off pace. Trying not to drive too much with the Prodigy playing, because you're going to end up with a speeding ticket. It's very much that sort of thing. But likewise with I probably watch almost too much TV and film once I get going with something. But there's a nice thing I have whereby I can either watch a film I really enjoy, whereby it might tip me on for an idea I have, or a film I didn't enjoy.
Yes.
Is actually very good as well, because I can sit there and go, why aren't I enjoying this?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just down to some of the creative decisions that have gone, whereby I can sit and go, I should have done this a bit. Actually, I would have preferred to have done this. It's like, why aren't you doing this part? Or
yes.
By the time I've done that, there's there's sometimes a whole list of notes. Okay, got me a short story. Let's go.
Yeah, when somebody's had a bad case of plot convenience stupidity in a movie. Any other questions?
Well, you would talk about a long career, but what about characters, so reoccurring characters? How do you keep them fresh? I mean, some authors seem to just keep the character exactly the same, and I really find that boring. So how do you progress a character through different books and let them grow without making them too different and upsetting your readership? So that sort of balance.
That's one of the things I'm exploring at the moment, because Dan McMain's on his 6th adventure, and his life has changed. And because this is contemporary fantasy, it has to be realistic, it has to be convincing. And so the changes in Dan's life have to affect what he does next and what he does now. I think the only way you can handle that sort of thing is to be emotionally honest with yourself and with the reader. Yes, because somebody who swans through 20-odd books and remains fundamentally unchanged is going to become less and less convincing as that goes on. But it is a very interesting challenge, and it's a very interesting question. Have any of you got sort of long-term characters that you're dealing with over multiple books?
Not in multiple books, but I've got a sort of vampire character called Rome Bellinger. And the funny thing about him was that I was actually writing a novel with someone, a sort of vampire novel, and it didn't get completed, but there was this albino vampire character in it, and which kind of took off, and he was named Rome Bellinger because Dennis Bellinger is the lead singer of a heavy metal band called Voivod, so I thought that's a good surname. But there's another band called Cave In, and I had one of their CDs, and I looked at the CD, and it was one of the band members was called Rome McGrath. I thought, Rome, that's real. Actually, it was a font, it was Adam McGrath, but I thought it said Rome McGrath. So I named him something Rome Bellinger, and he's been in lots of anthologies, and I've been writing a trilogy about Tam Lin, and he turns up in the first sort of novel of that trilogy. But I think he's an interesting character for me because he can be sympathetic and almost romantic. But there's in the dealer's room there's a cult detective monthly or quarterly, whatever it's called, magazine. I've got a table, and there's a story. One of the Rome Bellinger stories is in an issue, and it's quite shocking actually. The ending of the story, that he turns out to be a real bastard when he seeks out he sleeps in a magic cabinet. One of his sidelines is being a magician, and Bellinger the Uncanny, and there's stories about that and about the magic club he's a member of. But he's looking for another resting place, and there's this magic cabinet of a spiritualist who would sort of cut herself and smear the blood in this cabinet and summon spirits, and he wants that. But the spirits are all trapped in the cabinet. I won't give away the ending, but it's quite shocking. You think, what a bastard. So that's kind of different for him.
You can, I don't know about anything else, you can make friends with a character you start enjoying, and that can go very well or very badly for you. But that's part of the fun. You might start writing with a particular idea of what you know the situation you're going to throw them in. You think you know what they're going to do. Doesn't always work out that way. You come away from the end of draft chapter and have surprised yourself in some capacity with that, and then you know after that whether they're going to stick around. That's what I say there. It's like they're basically friends with us. So.
I'm wearing the wrong glasses. Is that
That's
we're time's up?
That's a time at
Okay. Right. Very quick.
Stop, shut up.
When I wonder how writers sustain creativity, I look at things like authors like Ramsey Campbell and Terry Pratchett and Barton Dermott, who have been doing this for decades longer than me. And one of the things that you see is they are writing. Terry Pratchett had the Guards books, he had the Witches books, he had the standalones, he had, what's the other thread? Rincewind. So was sort of ringing the changes within the same world. Ramsey Campbell, the man is amazing. He has written so many things, but he's always striving to write something different, something new, something interesting. Val McDermid, again, has the Karen Perry novels, the Tony and Carol novels, the standalones. And I think that's something that I look at and think, yes, that's one way to do it. Quick, short answers. Any other tips for sustaining creativity as you continue?
I think, one of the things we haven't touched on, and I don't know if the audience write, and they're probably, if you're writing novels, and I think that's really important to write novels, but I think one of the things is found ideas. Like, I don't know if you read sort of market news sort of things like the Horror Tree or Insanity and other forms of publishing, or publishing other forms of insanity, where there are anthologies and magazines out there, but you almost get for particularly anthologies, it's like a given idea, there's a themed anthology. So that that's something to work at and might inspire you to write a story for
see what else is going on.
Yeah, but also not to let it distract you from your main sort of body of work.
Something very quick.
Surround yourself with writing, with words, with things that you're passionate about, with people that inspire you. I wouldn't be sat here if I hadn't followed Juliet when I first stepped into Fantasycon in York years back. I wouldn't be able to say I have had award-nominated stories and things like that. So build yourself that influential circle that will keep inspiring you without you even realising it, because that's why I'm still here and still writing now. Don't do it to yourself any other way, because life will try and push you back into a machine that you don't want to be in.
Anything to add, Russell?
take a break, do something else. Honestly, when you're
Yeah.
doing something else, an idea will probably hit you with something else where you least expect it.
And on that note, we'll finish. Thank you very much. Yeah, it was good fun.
Come on, circle.
Yeah.
We meet sort of sometimes in we were meeting in season, but we went down live. I think actually I think there's a CC which goes down. So oh yes, the Canal Westwood Church, the Open Centre. Just something we
Complicated reasons, I'm going to stop that.
So we meet there, yeah.
Yeah.
Or we meet soon.
The only day I'm occupied is Tuesday.
Thank you very much.